of the Uhuru movement and the International African Revolution. Today, as you know, our discussion is themed Biden, Lesser of Evil, Biden the Lesser. And of course, this title speaks to the trap that so many people felt themselves confronted with in terms of this just concluding presidential election that really helped to expose the nature and character of the United States government, the whole capitalist colonial system in this country and throughout the world. And so some people felt like they only had a choice between Biden and Trump, and many people were dissatisfied with that choice, and felt like they just had to vote for one or the other. They had to pick what they characterize as the lesser of two evils. This is something we hear all the time in the politics inside this country, and we described as the evil of two lessers. And one of the reasons you hear this all the time in this country in terms of choosing the lesser of two evils, this being the only choice that people have, is that the social system, the imperialist, the white ruling class, the blooded, jawed, terroristic white ruling class that controls much of the world, even though it is a diminishing kind of authority and control they have now. This government, this ruling class has constructed and created a system where it minimizes, if not almost eliminates, the possibility of any kind of contention from anybody other than one of the capitalist colonialists themselves, one of the colonizers, or a representative of the colonizer, somebody who works within the structures that have been established by the colonizers. This is what they've established. This is what they set up. And in order to protect the system and to make sure that there is no meaningful kind of intervention. And so that's why for a long period of time, African people were not allowed to vote in this country. And the only time Africans in the United States were allowed to vote was after the US government has done such a horrible attack on our struggle, assassinating leaders, destroying organizations that really spoke to the true interest of our people, so that by the time we had a situation to see the 1965 Voting Rights Act go into meaningful kind of effect, that there was nobody for Africans to vote for. We had faced terror throughout this country. Churches had been bombed, little girls murdered, assassinations of leaders had occurred. And what was left was an absolutely barren field when it comes to somebody that really represented our interests. And as they were doing this, of course, the US government raised up another sector from our community and called them the Black leaders. After these Black leaders made their careers, many of them in part, by denouncing real Black leadership that was being killed and arrested in this country. In fact, there are people who are still in prison today coming from that struggle. They are political prisoners. They are prisoners of war in some instances because they tried to stand up for African people. So the United States government was determined that that should not happen, destroyed our movement almost, and then made it possible for Africans to vote. But the only thing we had to vote for was the Democratic Party and its program, and that has now become the norm. That has become the accepted. That has become the way it is assumed that African people can make any kind of headway or maintain what might be characterized, even despite the terror that's being waged against us on a regular basis, maintain what might be characterized as some kind of relatively secure existence. It's been through this process, and that this process, as the ruling class gives us, its Democratic Party and its Republican Party. These are both parties. These are parties that represent the same class. So even though they call themselves by different names, you will not see any meaningful difference ultimately in what they stand for. And so people have no choices. So you have people go to vote with the assumption that there is some choice, there's a Biden or there's a Trump. But that's why people always end up saying, well, we have to vote for the lesser of two evils. The evil is the colonial capitalist system. And so what we say is that what you're doing is voting for the lesser of two evils, as opposed to the how do they put it? You're voting for the evil, which is the social system itself of two lessers. And the two lessers, of course, are those candidates who come forward representing the interests of white power colonialism. They can be black, brown, what have you, but they do not represent, generally speaking, the interests of our people. And so we use this theme of Biden, the lesser question mark. And the fact is that the US President Donald J. Trump was an extraordinarily polarizing political force in this country, perhaps the most polarizing that's ever existed for a long time, certainly for a long time. He broke many of the rules of propriety and things like that, political propriety in this country. He smashed into the electoral scene as an outsider, somebody who the ruling class initially took as a joke. And he was a joke, except that he was the kind of joke that the majority of white people were looking for. And so he ended up winning the election. But to win the election, he had to fight against the system. He had to fight against, he was one of 17 different candidates for the nomination of the Republican Party for president. And so while all of them were staking out and had worked with, staked out their particular positions of how to move forward with this country with the imperialist agenda that functioned within the existing political realms and propriety, Trump attacked all of them. He attacked them. And this was one of the things that excited a lot of white people, and the fact that he was able to come out and publicly talk about Mexicans being rapists and our countries and Africa and other places being fecal receptacles, and just a horrible kind of person that brought up nakedly, actually raised high for everybody to see the ideological foundation of the capitalist system, the thing that has made all the white people rich, the colonial capitalist system. Colonialism, that is the domination of African people, Mexican people, and other peoples around the world by Europe, and then by Europe as it reflected in the United States. This is the thing that made white people wealthy, rich, and they know about it. And it made them rich, even if they were workers within the capitalist system. Compared to the rest of us, they were well off. And they understood this. Instinctively, it was understood that the well-being of white people here and around the world came at the expense of the well-being of Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world. And then facilitating the ability for white people to agree with that, and for Africans and Mexicans and other people to also fall victim to this assumption was an ideology that's born of the kind of social system that was existed at the expense of African people. People refer to that as racism. And racism is this set of ideas that validate the imperialist oppression, the colonial oppression, the colonial terror of Africans and other peoples around the world. And so when Trump comes out using very obvious inflammatory ideological statements, they are inflammatory because there was a need at a particular time by the system in this country to attempt to persuade, to seduce African people to become comfortable with our oppression. It's like what Malcolm X used to talk about, how our oppressors would use some of even from our own communities to function like Novocaine when you're dealing like with the dentist who convinces you that even as they're committing all kinds of horrible things in your mouth, that everything is cool, that you suffer peacefully. And this is the kind of thing that we've been confronted with in this country. So it's become the norm. This is the way you do things in this country. Then anybody else or any other organization right now that moves against that is seen as odd, seen as weird, seen as unrealistic in terms of trying to make this struggle. So you had this incredible election, and with the assumption that the only choice that people had was Biden or Trump. And you picked the one that was supposed to be less evil than the other. And what happened, of course, is that the majority of white people, I think something like 57% of the white people who voted for Trump. And this is in the face of all these predictions by liberal pundits and really clever and smart Africans that Trump was doomed because of the nasty stuff he said about Black people and other people around the world and inside this country, that he had just lost it. He was going to be roundly defeated. This was the political line that came out. But Trump had mobilized this incredible base of white people. 57% or so of the white people who voted for the Trump and voted for his message. And Trump's message was against almost everybody in the world. It was make America white again. And that's what everybody understood when he said make America great again. Make America white again was what it was all about. Because the only past that America has ever had, you got to remember, when you talk about American past, you're talking about a past that came as a consequence of stealing this land. White people are not indigenous to this land any more than we are as African people. So the Make America Great Again was to take it to this place that had a greatness that clearly came from murdering millions of indigenous peoples in this country, cutting off the top of their heads, calling it scalps, collecting them and getting a bounty. I forgot how many millions of dollars the state of California paid out to white people who would kill indigenous people and take the top of their head. They call it scalping. Of course, what we've seen since then is that they have, just like they always do, the rulers have now defined the indigenous people as the one who was trying to track down white people and call scalping, but it was a white thing. And the scalp was evidence of the fact that you had murdered, that you had killed this person. And the policy of the United States government in particular parts of the country at particular times was to exterminate the indigenous population. So this is where we're coming from. So you're talking about make America great again. Is that what you want to become much more efficient in doing? You got the indigenous people who are living in these concentration camps called Indian reservations, where nearly 50% of them do not even have running water. Make America great again. You've got the African people who were brought here, and you've had various kinds of courts decisions and popular expression from white people that African people were simply brought here to be worked like animals, worked like beasts, and that there were not supposed to be any rights afforded to us, and certainly we were not supposed to have the benefit of our labor. And when Africans, of course, just like the indigenous people, just like the Mexican people from whom half of Mexico was stolen, and where they crossed that border, they created this border, artificial border, to make the Mexican people illegal aliens. I mean, all of this kind of stuff happened, and there has always and consistently been resistance, fighting back, fighting back, fighting back. So that's what's happened. And so when you talk about making America great again, part of what that is to suppress the struggles, to suppress the efforts, the independent efforts of Black people, of Mexican people, of oppressed peoples around the world to take back our freedom, to take back our resources, take back our dignity as human beings. And so Trump said, make America great again. Everybody understood, everybody understood, everybody understood it. Even if you're a liberal newscaster, a pundit, even on some popular so-called community radio stations refused to say it, everybody knew he meant make America white again, which is to suppress the struggles and take all the resources from oppressed people. That is the basis and the foundation of the wealth of this country. So that's what we have. And so this has become the norm. And of course, the height of the resistance of oppressed peoples around the world, we saw it always there. We saw it in the 40s. We saw it with Garvey movement. I mentioned Garvey, of course, because he was such an incredible, influential political force in the world. Not just the African people around the world. In fact, FBI reports used to say, getting information from their informants and things like that, that from all around the world, people who were fighting for freedom would come to Garvey's movement, and they would have meetings, and they would have secret meetings about how to win freedom. So you're talking about a time when you're looking at Garvey, you're looking at Sun Yat-sen from China, you're looking at forces like Pancho Villa and Zapata and various other forces around the world who were fighting to be free. There's always been this struggle. There's never been a time where we did not fight back. And every time we fought back, it got defined similarly to how you see it being defined today, except as a consequence of how the social system or the political system in America has evolved. And in some other places where there's such a thing as a liberal imperialism, it has been necessary in order to sort of make an assumption of it being unnecessary, the struggle of other people. They've begun to incorporate the possibility or the probability or the likelihood of the lie, and that somehow those of us who are oppressed were now part of the oppressor nation and or state apparatus. And that's been something they've done all along. And even France, when the people in Algeria were rising up and fighting to be independent, France said, you can't be independent. How are you going to be independent? Because Algeria is a part of France. They made it, and just like how you going to be free, Black people in the United States, because you are Afro-American, you got the same kind of hyphen that the French tried to give to Algeria. And then the communists, even Communist Party organizations, as supposed to be these great revolutionary forces, took a similar stance around the struggle in Algeria and even around the struggle in Vietnam, who were fighting against French imperialism. So this is the world that peoples have been fighting against. In the 1960s, we saw a high tide of this resistance. We saw it consolidating all around the world. And so peoples everywhere were fighting, from Congo, from places like South Africa. And we saw that begin to develop even as in the 50s, the Mau Mau, what have you, in Kenya, fighting the British, forcing the British to adopt this policy called indirect rule, which is nothing but neo-colonialism. Say we can't stand on top of them as white people and make them do everything we want to do, so we have to create indirect rule. We put them in charge of themselves. We make them managers of our exploitation. And that's what they've done. And they run the schools and they create all of the institutions that tell us what is going on. It tells us who they are and it tells us who we are. They invented themselves, and then they invented us, Africans and other oppressed people, as impoverished imitations of who they are. And that's what we're looking at. And so this thing we had to go through, make America great again, make America white again. This is what dragged, and this was what has informed much of what we've seen here. And it's not just Trump. And this is something that we need to be clear on, because we're talking about Biden. The lesser, well, we are reminded that this is a history of the United States. Its founding was a consequence of white Europeans in the process of becoming white, came to this land and took the land. And we can just go back, we look at some of the struggles that we're involved in now. Look at foreign policy objectives and things of the Trump administration and what the United States, what the Biden administration is going to have to deal with too. Even as Biden talks about trying to ratify or take back some kind of treaty that would allow, that would let the Iranian people have access to their own money that's been stolen by the United States government, that would end the starvation attempt that's being made against Iran. But none of them will say that the basis of this contradiction with Iran, the immediate basis, is the fact that in 1953, the United States government overthrew the elected government of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, and put their person in charge. And the person they put in charge was there to keep the Iranian people oppressed, because Iran at the Persian Gulf was a very strategic location, and for overseeing U.S. and white power interests throughout the Middle East and in the northern parts of Africa, and protecting the canal. That was what it was for, along with this partner, the reactionary white settler country of Israel. This is where this all flows from. So when you look at the policy of Iran today, and you hear Biden talking about, well, he's going to take back this situation where the Iran won't be starved in the same way, and Iran will be allowed, like the white man allowed to to carry out their program for using nuclear energy for their own benefit. This is just an absolute fraudulent attempt to paint this picture of benevolence by a government that has been responsible for impoverishing the people of Iran and for making it absolutely clear to Iranians that they need to have everything they can to protect themselves from US imperialism, which has never stopped fighting them. And I mentioned the war that happened, the overthrow of the government in 1953, but they initiated a war against Iranian people after the Shah was overthrown. The US government did that. They facilitated a war between Iran and Iraq. They facilitated it. They gave the poison gas that Hussein, that was finally, that Iraq was finally ultimately blamed for using in that war. They gave it to Iraq as a part of the war that they were making against the Iranian people. So this is the reality. This is the ground. And I think it's really important for us to understand it's bigger than Trump. It's a social system. And Biden is somebody who's played historically a powerful role in maintaining the oppression. I mean, you know the things that he did in terms of the crime bill that resulted in 500% increase in the numbers of people who went to prison in this country. You know that he's responsible for the fact that 1 out of every 8 human beings in prison in the world is an African in this country. You know that he was also a member of the Obama regime, and before that, various other kinds of regimes in some way or another in this country that has been responsible for war. He was a part, he supported the war on the Iraqi people. And then, of course, what he's done since he's lost his popularity, all he had to do was say, oops, oops. You know, he didn't say as a consequence of my crimes against the people of Iraq in a war that was violated all kinds of international law. What I'm going to do is make sure that the United States pays reparations to the people of Iraq to try to repair some of the damage being done to them. No, they didn't do anything like that. They're still trying to control the people in Iraq. They're still trying to control the people in Syria. They're still trying to control the people in Iran, even if you have a Biden regime that comes and says that he's going to remove some of the stuff that Trump did. It's like Malcolm X used to talk about somebody sticking you with a 9-inch knife and then pulling it out for 3 inches and then telling you that they've made progress. You still got a knife in you, and that's what the US has imposed on peoples around the world. So just recently, we had a situation where Biden had this press conference to introduce a part of the forces who are coming into his government. And Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and National Intelligence Director, Avril Haines, and then United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield. And of course, there's Kamala Harris, and then you've got somebody like Alejandro Mayorkas. And so what this is telling us is he's saying America is back. America is back. This is Biden's message. This is what he said. And then he said that we're going to have a government. We're going to have a cabinet, a government that looks like America. Well, what in the hell does that mean? It looks like America. I mean, look at what we have here in terms of Avril Haines, who is over the National Intelligence Organization that oversees even the CIA. I mean, she's somebody who participated in the torture and these secret prisons where they were taking and torturing people when she was deputy of the CIA. And Anthony Blinken played similar roles, has justified every kind of war that's been made against people around the world. He's a terrorist and a war criminal. And then, of course, there's United Nations who's been nominated or put forward as the person who would be the US ambassador to the United Nations. That's Linda Thomas Greenfield. And she was the US representative for Africa under the Obama regime. The same Obama regime that pushed harder than anybody else, any previous government, to initiate the AFRICOM plan, where the United States has established bases all over the continent of Africa. She was there for the purpose of maintaining the poverty of Africa and separating Black people from each other from inside Africa and around the world, by propping up terrorist thugs who kill us in Africa on a regular basis. And then you have people like her at the United Nations going tisk tisk about, and they're the ones who set it in motion, and she was there when that happened. So when you look at this and you say that the lesser Biden, the lesser what? The fact is, this is what people are stuck with. What did Biden say? Did he say anything about what he's going to do about the starvation regime that the United States government has placed on Zimbabwe? They placed this, say they're going to starve the people in Zimbabwe because Africans had the audacity to take back the land from the white people who use Maxim machine guns and gunned down thousands of us at a time, to steal that land as a part of the whole conquest of Southern Africa. Is anything coming from Biden? Is anything coming from this woman who they're putting forth to erase that and to fix what they have done there to Zimbabwe? And what about Israel, this parasitic white nationalist, the nastiest parasitic white nastiest thing to come onto the scene since America itself was founded? What about Israel, who gets paid billions of dollars to kill the Palestinians and keep their land and keep their territory? And you got Biden now, is he saying that he's going to do anything about that? He hasn't said anything about that. In fact, he is just, they're talking more about the tone that they use when they oppress people. And what about Venezuela, where people had the audacity to stand up and say, this is our oil in Venezuela, this is our land, our country, and we will do with it what we want in our own interest. What about that? Biden and his team haven't said a damn thing about that, and I guarantee you that they will continue to pursue the same policy that Trump pursued. And one reason you know they'll do it, because they didn't even condemn it when Trump was doing it. What about the whole Russia-China thing? Biden is planning to even amp up the struggle with Russia and China. Might not use the same language, but the objective is to make sure that Russia and China cannot contend with the United States. The United States has presented itself to the world as the most powerful country in the world. It would dominate the world. That's its objective. Of course, it's losing. Everywhere it's losing. And everybody can see that the United States power is in a period of descent. And Russia and China are evidence of that descent. And so now they are acting like they want to make war with China. They want to make war with Russia almost. And they're starving China. They're trying to starve China. Of course, China is such a fast-growing entity that the U.S. can see that it is on the decline when it compares to China. And then Russia is another force that has been used because the existing international liberal imperialist order was created in part as a process, a method that they would use to contain what was then the Soviet Union, or Soviet Russia, or communist Russia as they called it. And that could contend with Europe, that could contend with America for the loyalty of the people throughout Europe, and the possibility of establishing another kind of social system where working people would have authority. So this is what we're looking at, and you don't hear that coming from Biden. The lesser, Biden, the lesser, let me tell you, what we want to make plain is that I'm not just talking this talk just to inflame emotions or something to that effect. I know you're tired of that. I'm tired of it too. To hear people who come and just say America this, America that, America the black, 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 but don't offer up any kinds of suggestions about how we can move forward. People begin to think a revolutionary movement is unrealistic because it doesn't do anything but that. Many people know that this country, this election, had the largest turnout of voters in the history of this country. That's something like 80 million people voted for Biden, the highest that's ever happened for any person running for office in this country. And 74, the second highest number of votes that's gone to a candidate, presidential candidate, went to Trump, with 74 million people. So there is this appearance of great popularity for the system. etc. But the system expresses this apparent popularity because people don't feel like they have any other options. Certainly African people have been trapped with that. So we're not telling you just to be upset. We're not telling you that something will happen just because you're Black, that's going to be enough, or something to that effect. Just go out and learn the 7 principles of this or that. What we're saying is that we don't have to accept this, that we have to have the long view. We have to fight. We have to win. We can win. And that there's an approach that we can take to make this struggle. And our party, the African People's Socialist Party, has been engaged in this for a long time. I'm not worried about what Trump's appointee is going to do in Africa, because we're building in Africa. There's African People's Socialist Party. It's located in Africa. It's there in South Africa. It's there in Uganda. It's there in Tanzania. It's there in Ghana, and growing in other places as well, some of which I did not mention just now. The African People's Socialist Party is in the Caribbean. The African People's Socialist Party stretches throughout Europe and we're building in the United States as well. And we're building concrete programs that represent Black power, power for Black people, unapologetically power for Black people. And then we are basing our relationship with everybody else on how they can relate to the struggle of Black people for power. And we're not looking just for people who like us and the fact that we sing good or something to that effect. We want people to be able to unite with the struggle of Black people for our own Black power, for self-determination, to be able to say that our children will be able to have a future. That's one of the reasons that we organize, participated and organized the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. Because we know that the vast majority of people at this time, at this particular moment in history, are trapped in this electoral process. That vast majority of African people who are to politics, engaged in political activity, they're doing it in the Democratic Party. They're 25% of the base of the Democratic Party are African people. And when I say that, I'm not saying that what Biden has presented in terms of what's supposed to be a cabinet that looks like America is representative of what I'm talking about, because they may look like America, but that's what white power in Black face looks like. White power in Mexican face, or Cuban, so-called Hispanic or Latino. This person from Cuba who been put over, I think it's Homeland Security, something to that effect. We have to be able to look after our own interests and have to be able to do that in a very programmatic, serious kind of way. So the coalition, the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparation, recognizing that the majority of our people who are participating in political activity, they're not doing it in the African People's Socialist Party. Yet, they're not doing it yet. They will come here. We are convinced that we will win them. We're convinced that they will join the Uhuru movement as it expresses itself in all of its iterations. But that's not the case now. In order to get them here, we have to go where they are. And so we have created, participated in building the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And in this process, we've created a school, an annual school, to teach people to take the mystery out of the electoral politics, out of running for office, how to contending for office, and to force our issues on the agenda, to make them have to talk about reparations, to make them have to talk about Black community control of the police, to take that into the political arena. It's not something that they pushed out. They thought they got rid of it when they killed Malcolm, when they killed King, when they killed Bobby Hutton, when they killed Fred Hampton, when they killed Lawrence Mann, co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party. Their objective was to get rid of us. We're saying today, Black is back. Black is back. And so we have to begin to implement programmatically what it is that we stand for ideologically. And so the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations has pulled together this process. This is the 5th year of allowing African people to come together and to learn how to participate in electoral politics on our own terms, speaking to our own issues. So that's going to be happening in April. And everybody here is invited. And you can go to blackisbackcoalition.org. blackisbackcoalition.org and see about that and see what the program for reparations, what the program for Black community control of the police, what the program for the uplifting of African women and the African family for free healthcare, what the program for African community control of the school, what that looks like. and how that can be put on the agenda. So this is not just some statement in opposition to white people and white man and all that, but we're saying there has to be it's a struggle for power, and that we can define that power. We can say that there are ways in which we can begin to work now, the objective being to capture power over our own lives, economic, political, social power, culturally over our own lives. And so that's one aspect of it. We also engaged, there's Comrade Charles Barron out of New York. In the face of this massive gentrification that's happening to our people, we see Harlem now no longer a majority African, Washington, D.C., all these places, gentrification, removing our people out of these communities. And Barron has been a powerfully effective proponent of Black power, standing up for Black people, revolutionary Black power. And he, for a long time, was a part of the city council there in East New York. And his district was the only district in New York where African people did not lose a part of the population due to gentrification, but actually gained people, Black people who came to live there in what is mostly affordable housing. So Barron is he's in the state assembly now. He's running again for, he's being term limited, so he's going to be running for city council again. You can support Charles Barron. You should support Charles Barron as a part of part of what you can do in the face of this Biden, Trump, and the Democratic Party and Republican Party, because it doesn't matter what party somebody's in. The question is whether they run on a program for Black power. And so what I'm saying is that you can go to capital NYC, then one word, votes, V-O-T-E-S, and then second, another word, contribute. Go to that, and you can make a contribution to the campaign of Charles Barron for city council. You must do that, because all of the enemies have unsheathed their knives, and Uncle Toms and sellouts and what have you, and are trying to remove him from that position. And the other thing that's really critical is that in St. Louis right now, there's a movement afoot. It's called the Black Power Blueprint, where a whole community has been able to fight back against gentrification, has been able to fight back against the ongoing deterioration of our communities that's left thousands, literally thousands of properties collapsing, and the community pushed out and property stolen from African people only to be sold to rich developers, where they call it a food desert, where violence is a natural situation in the face of the imposed starvation and oppression of our community. So the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, we are engaged there. You can do too. You can participate in supporting these candidates. We're running candidates in St. Louis, one for the 21st Ward and the other for the 3rd Ward. And these are wards in St. Louis where the Black Power Blueprint is concentrated. And we're running this in the face of not only of the government openly coming out against us to try to keep us from being victorious in a struggle that we can win. We know we can win this struggle, but also it comes indirectly in the form of neo-colonial Africans who occupy those offices. In the 3rd Ward, that's where you see the 3rd Ward, that's where Comrade Herdosha Kalambayi Bentham is running for ward, to be elected to that ward as alderperson. In the 21st Ward, where Comrade T'Challa Masimba is running. You can support that, send money, send all the kind of support, and then if you can even go there and work in the campaign. How do you get in touch with that? You go to the website for Kalambayi, and it's Vote Kalambayi. That's K-A-L-A-M-B-A-Y-I. Vote K-A-L-A-M-B-A-Y-I. VoteKalambayi.org. And then you can go to support Comrade T'Challa, who's in the 21st Ward. Go to Vote Masimba. That's MASIMBA.org. Vote MASIMBA.org. And you can participate. You don't have to feel like there's nothing you can do except now lay down and take the consequences of the fact that a lesser of evil of the two lessers is gone into the presidency. We can win these things on the ground. We can begin this process of accumulation of power for the purpose of negating the power and influence of white power, of Biden, of Trump, or anybody else like them or their representatives in our community. But we have to believe enough in ourselves. We have to believe that we have a right to do this. We have to defy all of those who say to us that you're being unreasonable to talk about Black people, Black power, Black this, Black that, when it's Black people who are being oppressed, when it's Black power that has been taken from us that makes it so easy for us to be oppressed. We got to believe enough in ourselves to take this stand. This is what the African People's Socialist Party is about. And this is what the African People Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, is about. And to find out more about that and join, actively join, go to apspuhuru.org. We don't have to settle for any lessers. We don't have to settle for any evil. We can forge a path for our own liberation. We've done it in the past. And the only thing that's ever stopped us in the past is the lack of organization. And of course, to the extent that the US government was able to destroy our leaders, destroy our organization, but we're back. Black is back. So I want to say again that we don't have to accept any lesser. We don't have to accept any evil. Certainly, we don't have to accept it without a fight. And the history of African people in this country, in the United States and around the world has always been to resist that white power that has imposed itself. When the first white man put his foot on the continent of Africa and forced a Black person to do something against our will. We can take our freedom back. We can take our resources back. And again, we can get rid of all the evil and all the lessons that have tried to prevent that from happening. Uhuru.